Hi, welcome back to Danny Harris Arts in part 3 of this largemouth bass wood carving project. In this segment, I'm going to be burning the scales, mounting the fins, and mounting the eyes. And if you want to see how I made the eyes, you have to go back and check out a video that I made on making the eyes. But I did these off camera. But if you have any questions or comments, you can leave for me in the comment section below. And if you're new to the channel, I'd really appreciate it if you consider subscribing and hit that thumbs up if you like these videos. And if you'd like to keep up with the videos, be sure and hit that notification bell. So I'm going to turn the camera around here and get started. Alright, so what I've got here is what I've done here is I've drawn me out a little grid pattern on the body, and what this is going to do is going to kind of help me keep the scale direction down, and also help me determine the size scale tip I need for this particular size bass. And how I know that is most bass have anywhere from 59 to 77 from the front of the lateral line to the back of the tail, and there's 7 to 9 scales from the lateral line up to the back, and then 14 to 17 depending on the size you're on from the lateral line down to the belly. So, and that'll vary slightly between fish, from fish to fish. So by doing that, it lets me measure. I know how many scales I want to go up, so I know what size they need to be. So, and then I measure them to get it rough, like I drew out on the line. Let's do one here. I got a little bit on here, so I know by the rows how many scales I need to do, and then I kind of roughly measured what they were, and these were, the bottom scales here were like 7 millimeters. So, but I'll be using on a real fish, there's probably a dozen or more different sizes over the body. The cheek scales are all fairly irregular, so I'm only going to be using 4. I'm not going to be that anal about it, so I'm going to be using 4 different sizes, maybe 5. And on the cheek scales, I'm going to freehand them. I'll draw them on, and then I'll freehand them because they're so irregularly shaped on the gills and cheeks. I'd have to have 20 different scale tips to cover the cheeks. So I'm going to freehand those, and I'll show you that as I get closer. But anyway, since I've determined the size scale tips I need, I'm going to be using, like I say, 4 different ones. And I've got some areas drawn off here where they get smaller, like at the top of the head here, along the top of the back, along the belly, throat latch area here. I've got a little area drawn off here where they'll get a little smaller, and that might even double or get even smaller as they in 2 different places here. So I'll kind of pay attention. Back here by the caudal peduncle area, they get a little smaller also, right as it tapers off to the tail. So I'll use this grid to kind of help me keep up with where they're going. Like on the top, this is the lateral line here, and they take a scale that's different from the ones above and below them. So I've got a scale tip for that, and then I've got another little tip that I made to burn the lateral line nerve endings on each scale, and I'll show you that when I get ready to do it. But on the scale patterns, on a largemouth bass, and it's the same on a crappie too, the scales above the lateral line kind of go in a curve and follow the lateral line. They're kind of arced with it, and then everything below it is more in a straight line. So you can kind of see where this line terminates right here in this one, and then as you get further down, of course, it'll go all the way back, and then it changes at the belly. So so that's why I've got these lines drawn in here that kind of helps me keep it straight in my head, keeps the direction I need to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to burn everything from the lateral line down first, and then I'll swap over and I hold the pin at a different angle, and I'll show you that here in a second. But I've got my tip that I'm going to start off with. It's on here and ready to go. And one other thing I'm going to do here real quick is I'm going to draw some little vertical lines here, just to kind of help me keep the first couple rows in order. If I keep these first few rows in order, then the rest will follow. And I usually start here just behind the pectoral fin and work my way back, and then work forward from there forward when I finish the ends here. So I'll start here. I'm not going to start at the lateral line. I want to start just maybe one below it, and then I'll start doing my tips, the scales down here. And if you notice, I'm not butting right up against each scale there. A lot of people will burn them and they'll just go right next to it, the next one, and that's not accurate. What the way they really are is there's just a little gap between them. So you got that just a little bit of a gap between them there. So that's the way I'm doing here. You can see, and I'm just touching and pulling, and that gives that little bit of relief. Like I say, I'm not going to go all the way up to the lateral line. Once I get these done, I'll go back and do the lateral line scales and then tie everything in together. And I'll even go back and at the end, and I'll show you when I get there, I even put the hint of growth rings in the scales. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with using the same size scale tip on the whole fish. It'll work, and it'll give you the appearance and feel of scales. But like I say, this is going in competition, and judges look at that sort of thing, that sort of detail. So the more accurate you are with it, the higher your score. And I'm still new to wood carving. You know, I've only been doing this about a little over 3 years. And with each project, I learned just a little bit more. So if you've been following along, you may realize I do something a little different than I did the last time. That's because I've learned to do it a better way. I kind of look at some of my earlier videos and kind of cringe sometimes, but that's how I learn. getting here doing them, and then looking at other people's work, studying details, studying reference photos. And I'm sure there's things I missed on this one already. And I'll realize it once I get finished with it. I'll be looking at it and then I'll see something that I should have done different. And I make note of it and I do it different the next time. And another thing I do is when I get down here to the belly, and then again on the top, I'll do a zigzag pattern instead of going to one different line and stopping. And then when I meet over here, it lets me kind of tie it all in without noticing a definite line where you stopped. I'm using a razor tip wood burner, and this is called the BPH pin. It lets me change out the tips. It's got these little set screws where I can change out the tips. It just seemed more reasonable than buying a pin with a set tip and having 20 different pins. See, by doing those first few lines down, the rest of these will follow. And then I can work forward here. I'll show you a little bit of those. It's easier for me to work forward back than it is forward front. And another thing, when you're working on your wood, sometimes you'll have an area that's a little softer than other areas. And once you get your heat range set, you'll get to that softer spot and it'll look like it's charring it, burning way too hot. So you just have to realize where they are and make adjustments as you go. I can tell it's a little bit softer right in here than it is over here. So it's wanting to burn a little deeper, quicker. Let's see if my scale counts right now. So 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So that's right. So right now I've got 14 from here up. There'll be one more here and then the lateral line. So I'm gonna be within that range, 14 to 17 range. So that tells me I've got the right size scale tip going. Okay, so I'm going to stop right here. I stopped just before the bottom. I went over just a little bit on the front of the bulk of the belly here, and I stopped just before the edge of the gills and just before the spot here. So I'm going to switch. Actually, I'm going to go do these top rows first, and then I'll switch to a smaller scale for these areas here, and then the lateral line. So I'm going to start up here I'm gonna draw a little bit of a grid in here just to kind of help me stay on track just for the first few. And I'm drawing these just slightly curved. On this bottom row, I kept my pen straight, horizontal, with the lines I drew on the bottom. And on here, I'm going to kind of curve with the line as I do these scales, because they need to follow along that curve of the lateral line. So like I did down here, I'm going to start just before the lateral line here. Let me start a little further back here. Ooh, that's hot. And I'm only going to do about 4 rows because I'm going to switch to a smaller one up here. Sometimes you get a little bit of carbon buildup on the scale tip. I just rub it on the emery board, or sometimes I'll take a rough piece of wood and just kind of polish it off there. Get that little carbon buildup off of it. Because it can affect the heat range. Alright, so I'm going to stop right there, switch to a smaller one here, and do the lateral line in this area back here. And call it, well, I'll switch to another one there. So I'm gonna turn this off and let it cool off and swap these tips out, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I've put my smaller tip on here, and I'm gonna start tying in these smaller areas here. Alright, so I'm going to start doing the lateral line here. And I want to scale. Let me draw that in a little better where I can see it. I want the scale, this line, to center each scale that I put on it, because I'll come back and put a little tiny nerve ending . I don't know if you can see that or not. Let me draw all that in with this Sharpie. So you can kind of see. think you can see that. See the line that'll center each little scale there. All right, so I've gone in, I've got the smaller ones on the top edge here, and they started getting smaller back here on the back of the caudal peduncle, and then kind of along the edge of the anal fin here, and then on the throat latch area. And now I'm going to go in, and I've got one that's about 2 millimeters, and I'm going to go in along the edges of the head here and the tail, and then the throat latch area here, and make even smaller ones here. So just kind of finish it out. I almost forgot to tell you, you have to turn, when you're using these tiny ones like this, you have to turn the heat down, because the smaller they are, the less resistance they have, and the hotter they'll get. So you have to kind of always practice on a scrap piece of wood here before I come to the main thing. Alright, so there's one side complete. Oh, I still got to do the throat latch here, but I'll finish that up. But that's one side complete, down to the head, down to the tail, down to the edge of the fin, and then I'll finish the throat latch area here, and then I'll start on the other side. And I'll do that off camera, since you already get the idea what I'm doing. And but when I finish this, then I'll show you how I do the lateral line. All right, so I've got some, I penciled in some, the scales on the side, and I used some reference from a reproduction company as a guide. And these are molded off of a real fish, so they're just easier to see. And this is off of a website that sells them. It's called Waters by Klaus, and they have a lot of different ones. Reproductions for painting for taxidermists, but you can see the scales good on them, scale patterns good on them. So I just copied the scales, drew them on, and then I'm using this little flat round that I'm just going to go in here and draw them on, just freehand them. I need to test this here real quick, make sure it's not too hot. With this tip being round, it lets me do a nice round, even shape. And some of these are irregular shapes, so doing it freehand kind of gives me that irregular shape that I'm looking for. All right, so there's the scales all on one side. Scales on the cheek are all done. I just got to do this side now, and then I'll be making the eyes and ready to mount the fins. All right, so I'm going to do the lateral line now, and the way I'm going to do that is let me draw it on this piece of scrap paper here. I got the lateral line scale. Let me draw them out here. So I have the lateral line scales, and this little nerve ending is just a little raised end like that. Little raised nerve ending. And I'm going to do that. I've got this little tip I made here. One side's flat and wide for bigger scales, and then I got a little tiny one on this side, little flat edge that I can use to burn the scales in with, or the tips in with. Basically, I'll go to the scale, touch and pull to the right, and then I'll do the other side, touch and pull, and kind of flatten it out and leave that little raised level there. So let me turn it back on here and get going. Let this heat up just a second while I get my eyes on. And let me test it out here real quick. So I'm just going to go up here to each scale. I don't know if you can see that or not. Just putting a little indentation in it. And then I'll go all the way down, but I'll show you here and do the other side. Where did I stop at? Right there. And I'm just pushing down and then pulling over to kind of flatten it out along the edge of it. So, oh, you know what I forgot? I should have done that when I had the other one out. I need to take that same little round tip that I used to do these on, and I'm going to do growth rings on all the scales now. That's going to take a minute. So I'm going to get that changed out, and I'll do that. I'll show you a little bit of that, and then I'm going to move on to the other side off camera, and then when I come back, I'll be ready to start on the fins. Now I'm putting growth rings on all the scales. I don't know if you can see that or not. I'm not burning them real deep. Let's say this fish is 3 years old, so I'm putting 3 growth rings on it. Alright, you get the idea. So that's what I'll be doing on all of them. Alright. I clean forgot to press record putting these eyes in. Well, apparently my dumb butt didn't push record while mounting the fins as well, so I do have a YouTube short on that, so check it out, and you can see real quick, 30 seconds, how I did it. Or you can go check out some past videos where I'm mounting the fins on other projects. So I'll let all that cure, and then see, I got all the rest of the fins mounted and blended in with epoxy sculpt to the body. And like I say, I need to let that cure for 24 hours or so, and then I'll seal it and I'll be painting it. All right, that's gonna be it for part 3 of this largemouth bass wood carving project. Got the scales all burned on, growth rings burned in the scales, fins are mounted, and the eyes are mounted. If you want to see how I made these eyes, I've got a video on that also. It's kind of an in-depth project and fairly time consuming, but to me they just turn out much better. They're more organic, they look more lifelike, in my opinion they do anyway. They don't look commercial. But all that's left to do is paint, and I'm going to be doing something a little bit different this time, and that I'm not going to use an airbrush. I'm going to do it all by hand, and I'm going to show you some dry brushing techniques that's going to build up color and give it some depth. And so on a fish this small, it's really easy to do, and so I'll do that on part 4 coming up. I want to apologize real quick for being so long between part 2 and part 3 on this. About 8 weeks ago, I thought I was having a heart attack, and it scared the bejeebers out of me. I went to the ER, and turns out that I wasn't having a heart attack. It was just but my blood pressure was like stroke level high, dangerously high, and they finally got me stabilized, and got in to see a cardiologist, and he did some adjustments on medication, and after a battery of tests, they did a stress test on me, electrocardiogram, and they did an angiogram to check my veins, to check my heart, to see if there was any blockage, and it was all clear, thank goodness. But with the adjustment of the medication, I'm pretty much back to normal now, and but it scared the bejeebers out of me. So, but he told me you need to lose some weight, which I'm working on. I've dropped 27 pounds here in the last 6 weeks, and I've got 50 to go, so I'm going to be a skinny mini on here before long. But I appreciate you guys watching. That's enough yammering. I appreciate you guys watching. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them for me in the comment section below. And if you're new to the channel, I'd really appreciate it if you consider hitting that subscribe button, and give me a thumbs up if you like these videos. And I'll see you guys on part 4.